I don't think I've ever felt so erased as I did on my brother's 17th birthday. It wasn't just a party, it was like a full-blown festival, the kind you'd expect for a celebrity, not a kid still worried about passing chemistry. For weeks, my parents had whispered about it like co-conspirators. I'd catch snippets about the venue, the playlist, and the guest list. Whenever I walked into a room, the conversation stopped. I wasn't included, just the ghost haunting my own house. The day of the party, our backyard transformed into something out of a glossy magazine. Strings of fairy lights zigzagged across the yard, glowing lanterns floated in the pool, and a rented DJ booth blasted songs that shook the neighborhood. By mid-afternoon, the place was crawling with teenagers, some I didn't even recognize. They swarmed around my brother, each carrying bags and boxes wrapped in shiny paper. He smiled, laughed, and posed for photos like some crown prince. Meanwhile, I hovered near the patio door, clutching a plastic cup of soda, trying not to look like the world's saddest extra in someone else's movie. Nobody noticed I was even there, not my parents, not their guests, not even him. Mom floated around like a queen bee, cheeks glowing as she served trays of appetizers and laughed with the other parents. Dad stood over the grill in his #1 dad apron, flipping steaks like he was auditioning for a cooking show. At the center of it all stood my brother, grinning, adored, celebrated. And me, I was just background noise, a placeholder. If I disappeared, I doubt anyone would have noticed until the dishes needed washing. The big wow moment came at sunset. Everyone gathered as Mom and Dad rolled out a massive box. Inside, the latest VR headset, the one my brother hadn't stopped talking about since Christmas. He gasped, threw his arms around them, and the crowd erupted in cheers. I clapped along, forcing a smile that felt like glass cracking across my face. It was the kind of gift that screamed, "You are our everything." I couldn't help but wonder if my parents would ever see me with that same pride. Then came the AITA, towering 3-tier masterpiece covered in frosting designed to match his soccer team's colors. The kind of cake you order months in advance. Everyone sang, the candles flickered, and for one shining moment, he looked like the only child in the world. When the night finally wound down, my brother was allowed to leave with his friends for an after-party. Dad clapped him on the back, Mom kissed his cheek, and they told him to have fun. Me. I stayed behind, bagging trash from a celebration I wasn't part of. As I scrubbed red punch stains off the counter, one thought dug into my chest like a knife. If this is how they treat him at 17, what will they do when it's my turn? The thing about favoritism is that it doesn't just appear on birthdays. It seeps into every corner of your life, until you can't tell if you're a son or just some live-in helper who got forgotten in the shuffle. Take mornings, for example. My brother woke up to pancakes stacked high, eggs cooked exactly how he liked, and bacon that crunched just right. Me, I usually got whatever was left over. If the cereal wasn't stale, I considered it a victory. Then there was the school commute. Dad insisted on driving my brother, claiming it was on the way to work. They'd chat about sports, teachers, whatever came up. Meanwhile, I trudged to school on foot, rain soaking my backpack or snow biting my ears. If I ever complained, Dad just said it built character. Funny how character-building exercises never seemed to apply to the golden child riding shotgun in his heated car seat. Sipping orange juice from a travel mug, homework was another battlefield. Mom and Dad would huddle with my brother at the dining table, carefully guiding him through algebra equations or proofreading his essays. When it came to me, their patience evaporated. Was their go-to phrase. So I did figure it out. I became my own tutor, my own coach, my own cheerleader. Google, YouTube, and Trialander replaced the helping hands I should have had from my parents. And yet somehow, I was still the one called lazy. And don't get me started on extracurriculars. My brother's every interest became a funded adventure soccer, guitar lessons, even fencing at one point. They called it investing in his future. The one time I asked to join drama club, no time, no money, stay home. Guess who picked up the slack at home while he was off finding his passions? Me. Laundry, dishes, vacuuming if it needed doing. I was the one assigned. My brother's only chore was to keep his grades up. Everything else was apparently beneath him. Even family outings weren't really family outings. If we went to the movies, we watched his pick. If we ate out, it was his favorite restaurant. If If we shopped, he got the newest sneakers. While I was pushed toward the clearance rack, I tried, once, to bring it up. To tell them how I felt invisible, like my voice didn't matter. Mom laughed, said I was being dramatic. Dad nodded along without looking up from the TV. The conversation ended before it even began. That night, lying in my room, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how it could hurt so much to want something as simple as equality. I wasn't asking for fireworks or parades, just to be seen, just to be loved the same way. And yet, no matter how much I told myself not to care, each small dismissal carved a deeper hole in me. A hole that was filling quickly with bitterness I didn't know how much longer I could contain. Despite all the favoritism, my brother and I didn't have the kind of rivalry people might expect. He never rubbed it in, never lorded his golden child status over me. If anything, he seemed embarrassed by it. He had this quiet way of making things up to me. Like the time I mentioned offhand that I liked a certain indie band. A week later, he handed me their new album, bought with his own money. "Thought you'd like this," he shrugged. It wasn't just gifts. Sometimes when I was stuck pulling late-night study sessions, he'd sneak into my room with chips or cookies, smuggled from the kitchen. We'd sit cross-legged on my floor, eating and whispering until we were too tired to keep our eyes open. Those midnight snacks weren't just about food. They were about solidarity, about saying, "I see you. I know you're here." In a house where I felt invisible most of the time, that meant everything. He even tried to include me in his world. Every so often, he'd drag me along to hang out with his friends. They'd roll their eyes, but he'd brush it off. "He's cool," he'd say. "You'll see." And sometimes I actually did have fun. One of the best nights of my life happened because of him. A concert I desperately wanted to go to but knew my parents would never allow. He told them he needed to go for some school project and then smuggled me along as his +1. We jumped in the crowd, screamed until our throats hurt, and drove home with our ears still ringing. For a few hours, I wasn't the forgotten kid. I was just a teenager having the time of my life thanks to a brother who had my back. Even with smaller things, he looked out for me. When he got the new gaming console for his birthday, the one my parents made such a big deal about, he didn't hoard it. He set up a second controller and said, "Your turn." And when I wanted those neon lights everyone at school was bragging about, he pulled a trick, told our parents he wanted them for his room. They bought them instantly. A week later, he dropped the box on my bed, grinning. Too flashy for me anyway, living under the same roof. It often felt like we were in two completely different worlds, his glowing and celebrated, mine gray and overlooked. But his secret gestures built a bridge between us, a bridge only we knew about. Still, as grateful as I was for his efforts, they were only patches on a wound that kept reopening. His kindness couldn't erase the truth. Our parents loved him differently, more, and no amount of midnight snacks or shared concerts could change that. That realization festered in me. Gratitude mixed with resentment until I didn't know which emotion was stronger. My brother tried to be my ally, but at the end of the day, I was still the afterthought. And my birthday was coming up. My birthday crept up quietly, almost like it was embarrassed to exist. No whispered plans, no excited chatter, no fairy lights waiting in the garage. Just another date circled on the calendar, as plain as a bill due. The morning started like any other. Came downstairs half expecting, maybe foolishly, the smell of pancakes or a balloon tied to my chair. Instead, I found Mom scrolling on her phone, Dad sipping coffee, and my brother already dressed for soccer practice. "Happy birthday, Mom," said absently, eyes still glued to the screen. Dad gave a distracted nod. My brother, at least, got up to hug me, but even he looked guilty, like he knew this wasn't how it should be. I told myself not to care, but I felt the sting anyway. Birthdays were supposed to matter. And after years of watching my brother's celebrations, part of me desperately wanted one of my own. By evening, a few relatives dropped by. Nothing major, just neighbors and my aunt, who lived close. They handed me generic cards with $20 bills tucked inside. No music, no party, just awkward small talk in the living room. Finally, it was time for presents. Mom and Dad exchanged a sly look before handing me a small box wrapped in leftover Christmas paper. I peeled it open, expecting maybe a new pair of headphones, or at least something thoughtful. Inside was a can opener, shiny stainless steel can opener. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. "Funny," I said, glancing up, but they weren't laughing. They were smiling like they'd actually nailed it. Useful, right? Dad said. Now you can make your own meals instead of eating junk all the time. Mom nodded proudly, as if they'd given me the keys to a new car. The room went quiet. Even my brother froze, his jaw tightening. Are you serious? He asked them. That's his birthday gift? But Mom just waved him off. He'll appreciate it one day. I swallowed hard, the laughter stuck in my throat. Can opener. After years of watching my brother unwrap game consoles, guitars, and designer sneakers, I was handed a kitchen tool. The humiliation burned hotter than any candle on a cake. Everyone in the room shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to notice. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the carpet and vanish. My brother caught my eye, his expression filled with pity, and for once I didn't want his pity. I didn't want his sympathy. I wanted my parents to see me, to treat me as more than some charity case, unworthy of celebration. I muttered a thank you, forced a smile, and excused myself to my room. Once the door shut behind me, I let the tears come quiet, bitter tears for the birthday I never had, and probably never would. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The wound wasn't just sore anymore. It was infected, spreading anger through every corner of me. And I knew I couldn't keep quiet much longer. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that can opener. It wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol. Proof that to them, I wasn't a son worth celebrating, just an extra pair of hands to keep the house running. By morning, the anger had hardened into something sharp. I came downstairs and found Mom fussing over my brother's soccer uniform, while Dad packed snacks for his game. The same routine, the same blind favoritism. I couldn't take it anymore. Do you even hear yourselves? I blurted out, my voice shaking but loud enough to cut through the clatter. They both froze, startled. My brother looked at me nervously as if he knew what was about to happen. What are you talking about? Mom asked, irritation flickering across her face. I'm talking about last night. About every night. About years of being invisible while you treat him like royalty and me like I'm just extra. Dad's brows knit together. Don't be dramatic. We love you both. I laughed bitterly. Really? Because he gets parties, trips, tutors, and every hobby under the sun. Me, I get a can opener for my birthday. Silence stretched across the room, heavy and suffocating. Mom's lips tightened. You're overreacting. That gift was practical. Practical. My voice cracked. You think I wanted practical? I wanted to feel like your kid? I wanted you to remember me, to look at me the way you look at him, but you never do. You never have. Dad started to say something, but I cut him off. Gosh, years of bottled resentment poured out like a flood. You drive him to school, you help with his homework, you invest in his future. And me? You call me lazy? You tell me to figure it out myself? You don't even ask what I want. My brother stepped in then, voice steady, but angry. He's right. You treat us differently. I see it every day. I get everything handed to me while he gets ignored. It's not fair. That seemed to rattle them more than my words. They blinked at him like they couldn't believe he'd betrayed the unspoken script of our family. But he didn't back down. You don't just play favorites. You make him feel like he doesn't matter. For once, I didn't feel alone in the fight. My brother stood by me, giving weight to truths I thought no one else noticed. But instead of apologizing, my parents grew defensive, their faces tightening like masks. You don't understand how hard it is to raise kids? Dad snapped. We do what we can. No, I said, my voice steady now. You do what you want. And what you want is to pour everything into him while I get whatever scraps are left. Well, I'm done pretending it doesn't hurt. I turned, storming out before they could respond. My hands shook, my heart pounded. But for the first time in years, the words were finally out. And there was no taking them back. I stayed in my room most of that weekend, replaying the argument in my head. My parents avoided me, moving through the house like I was radioactive. The silence wasn't peace, it was punishment. But for once, I didn't feel guilty. My brother came by with a bag of chips and sat on the edge of my bed. You did the right thing, he said softly. They needed to hear it. His loyalty steadied me, even if the weight of their rejection still lingered. The next morning, Mom knocked on my door. She didn't come in, just left a plate of pancakes outside. It was a peace offering, maybe, but it felt hollow. Pancakes didn't erase years of being invisible. They were too little too late. Dad eventually cornered me in the kitchen. "We didn't mean to make you feel that way," he muttered, eyes fixed on the floor. It wasn't an apology, not really, just damage control. And the worst part, I could tell he believed it was enough. I wanted to scream, to demand something real, something that proved I mattered. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded. Let him think his words fixed things. Because the truth was, I'd stopped expecting them to change. The shift had to come from me. I couldn't keep waiting for their approval like a plant stretching toward a sun that would never shine. I had to find light elsewhere through my own goals, my own people, my own choices. So I started small. I applied for a part-time job at a bookstore downtown. I joined drama club despite their protests. I began carving out pieces of a life that didn't depend on whether my parents clapped for me or not. My brother supported me every step. When I got cast in my first school play, he sat in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. When I brought home my first paycheck, he celebrated like I'd won the lottery. The truth is, he couldn't undo the imbalance our parents created. But he gave me something just as valuable, proof that I wasn't invisible. And sometimes, one person seeing you is enough to survive being overlooked by the rest. Do I wish my parents treated me differently? Of course. Do I still feel the sting when I see them beam at him in ways they never have at me? Absolutely. But I've learned that their blindness isn't my burden to carry anymore. Because at the end of the day, the can opener they gave me wasn't just an insult, it was also a wake-up call. A reminder that if I kept waiting for them to hand me love, I'd starve. So now, I open my own cans, build my own future. And maybe one day, when they finally look up and realize the son they ignored became someone worth celebrating, I'll decide whether I even want them at the table.